for you, breaking news that for whatever reason is being downplayed or ignored by other media outlets, but we think you ought to know about it. 5 simple words describe it. There was no Russian collusion. There was no evidence whatsoever that the Trump campaign conspired in any way with the government of Vladimir Putin during the last presidential election, period. That's apparently the conclusion of the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee. That committee spent 2 years investigating this question, of course, hundreds of interviews, reams of classified documents, untold millions in taxpayer dollars. No collusion at all. That is what we are hearing tonight they have found. Now, if you've been following this story at all, and of course you have been, you will not be surprised by this. No Russian collusion is a lot like moon landing actually happened, or abominable snowman was probably a long-haired mountain goat. You knew that already because you're not an idiot. But if so, compare your mental acuity to that of prominent political figures here in Washington. Next time you feel dumb, watch this tape.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
Trump has the Kremlin clan surrounding him. There's more to be learned about it. I believe there's been collusion.
It's starting to smell more and more like collusion.
We saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude, possibly, with Russia.
Smells like collusion. Plenty of evidence of collusion. Hard evidence of collusion. In the end, it was all fake. And they knew that. They knew it wasn't real. They were lying from the very first day. Only their remarkable aggression, their willingness to say literally anything, no matter how outrageous or slanderous or vile, kept the rest of us from catching on to what they were doing. If the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee is willing to call someone a traitor to this country, there's got to be some truth to it, right? Actually, no, there wasn't. It was always a hoax. Adam Schiff is an unscrupulous charlatan. That's the real lesson here. Don't expect people like Schiff to apologize, though, or correct the record, much less repair the lives of the people they have destroyed. Carter Page still can't find a job. Roger Stone is still facing life in prison. Meanwhile, Schiff's PR team on the other channel continues like none of this ever happened. Here's Malcolm Nance of MSNBC explaining that the results of a 2-year Senate investigation mean nothing. People are guilty because we say they're guilty. We must punish them.
Let me just say one thing. When Benedict Arnold gave the plans to West Point to Major Andre, and they captured Major Andre, they did not have any real information linking those plans to Benedict Arnold, other than the fact that he was in his presence at one point during that day. But everyone knew it was treason when they caught the man and they hung him. So at some point, there is going to be a bridge of data here that is going to be unassailable.
No one had any evidence, but everyone knew it was treason when they caught the man and they hung him. That says it all. Let's repeat that once again slowly so you can write down those words and put them on your fridge as a memento of the terrifying mass hysteria we've all just lived through. Quote, everyone knew it was treason when they caught the man and they hung him. That's our country now. That's what the Russia insanity has done to us. The real government shutdown has lasted for nearly 2.5 years. That's 1% of this country's entire existence. We no longer have meaningful policy debates in Washington. We have investigations instead. Nobody can think clearly. Everybody's afraid. The country's core problems don't even rate as interesting anymore, either to legislators or the TV pundits who comment on legislators. The suicide rate just hit a 50-year high. Did you know that? We're in the middle of the worst drug epidemic in the history of America, including the one after the Civil War and the heroin epidemic of the 70s and the crack epidemic of the 80s. This is way worse. And it's one of the reasons the life expectancy in many parts of the country is dropping. This is starting to look like Boris Yeltsin's Russia. And yet nobody in Washington even notices. All Adam Schiff and the rest of the wild-eyed morons can think about is Vladimir Putin, collusion, our hacked democracy, and all the other mindless slogans they've repeated long enough to half believe. We've spent 2 years perpetuating a fraud, and they are still doing it. What is this? It's negligence on a stunning scale. It has nothing to do with Trump. It has everything to do with running this country, and they're not. Historians will look back on this moment in amazement and in sadness. Who put these crackpots in charge and let them break things? Why didn't any responsible person in the media say anything about it? Why did they collude in the charade? What the hell happened to America? History will judge us for this moment. Adam Schiff's grandkids will be ashamed of what he did. Molly Hemingway is the senior editor at The Federalist, and she joins us tonight. Sorry to get all huffy there. It's just, you have to think that if a story breaks that the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which has spent 2 years looking into this, says there's no evidence of collusion, that's got to be front page news, and that's got to spur some sort of soul searching on the part of everyone who's been repeating the lie, but no.
Right. Every day or every couple of days for 2 years, we've had this Russia collusion conspiracy spread and pushed by compliant people in the media. No matter how small an item was, it was pushed as evidence of some grand conspiracy. Then you have the Senate Intel Committee coming out and saying what the House Intel Committee already said. There's no evidence of collusion. There's no evidence of this thing that sidelined an incoming administration, that completely took the Attorney General out of commission until he was finally let go. That, you had just all of this hysteria, and we're not even going to cover it, or we're not going to mention it after pushing this story for several years. It's one thing for Democrats to push this. It's entirely another for people in the media to be so much going along with it. It's also something where we still aren't dealing with the fact that the intel community completely took in this information operation that was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. And they used this information to spy on a presidential campaign, to punish people for the crime of having not wanted Hillary Clinton elected president, or to put people in prison because they had the wrong political alliances. This is so deeply un-American. We are not supposed to do things this way.
No, we're not supposed to accuse people on the basis of no evidence. And by the way, just to be clear, I'm not talking about Trump. I think there's a higher bar for the president. People say all kinds of reckless things about the president. It's the weaker people who got crushed in this, people like Carter Page. I personally was called a Russian agent by the now chairman of the House Intelligence Committee because I asked a question he didn't like. My question is, because we knew pretty quickly that this was fraudulent, that there really wasn't any evidence at the basis of it, and that people had no interest in finding out the truth, why did so many Republicans play along?
That's another thing. It is one thing, like I said, for Democrats to do something like this. What have Republicans been saying for the last couple of years other than, oh, we just have to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait while the business of government doesn't happen because of this investigation?
Yeah, the one thing we can't do is fire Robert Mueller.
Yes.
Because actually, our constitutional system doesn't really acknowledge democracy. We can have someone who literally can't be fired in the middle of a democratic republic. How does that work? Republicans push that.
Someone who's literally unaccountable, who nothing can be done to, who has all the powers of the CIA and all the powers of the FBI. And Republicans sat there and said, there's nothing we can do about this.
So why would anyone vote for people like that? I mean, seriously. Right? So if you have one side that's perpetuating what is a transparent fraud and causing the wheels of government to grind to a halt, and things like a rising suicide rate to go unacknowledged because no one has the disk space left to think about anything but Russia, if you're playing along with that, why would Republican voters vote for you?
Right. I think it's one of the sad things about the current moment that many people who are in positions of power who are Republican fear the media, or they fear their peer group more than they care about upholding rule of law, or they care about having a functioning republic.
Their minds are not free. They spend all day trying to avoid being criticized by people who hate them for reasons that are not even related. And that's literally, they are ruled by their enemies. Their enemies live in their heads and control all of their behavior.
But they have a responsibility to Americans.
You
they
think?
serve in these positions of power because we expect them to have to take their leadership and their role very seriously. It doesn't sound like they take this seriously, and to not have been asking the important questions about this as things just went crazy for year after year, and then to pretend that what everyone's doing is pretending like they didn't do it. They're all trying to pretend like they didn't push this Russia conspiracy theory as it starts to fall apart.
I think, yeah, I agree. Thank you, Molly. Great to see you. Julian Epstein is a former chief counsel of the House Judiciary Committee, and he joins us tonight. But Julian, in addition to everything I've just been ranting about, and I try not to rant, I'm not a ranter by temperament, but this, I spent the first 3 months trying to take this seriously, okay? And it's not serious, clearly. But we have just completely changed our relationship as a nation with Russia, declared them an enemy, and moved toward war with them on the basis of a story that's fraudulent.
I think that's overstating it, but I am sympathetic to the notion that the problem with our politics is that both sides, and the media aligned with both sides, tends to get out in front of the facts.
Yeah.
Here. Now, I think collusion is a bad word, because collusion is not a legal word. I mean, you and I sitting here, we're colluding for a television show. It doesn't mean anything. The question is conspiracy to violate the criminal laws. There's no question in anybody's mind that the Russians violated criminal laws on election interference, the computer hacks and the illegal foreign expenditures. There's no question that those were criminal violations. The question has always been whether Trump or those around him conspired with the Russians on those two criminal actions. And I've said on this program before, I've said all year, that there's no evidence of that.
But then, so this is what's hard for me. So look, there are always going to be fringes. There are in both parties. You pointed that out, and I agree with you. So I'm one of the few people, I'm not always jumping on Maxine Waters because I don't think she's a serious person, actually. She's an outlier. I think the chairman of the House Intel Committee is. I think the Speaker of the House is. Those are serious leaders of the Democratic Party, and both of them, you just saw the tape we played, accused the president and those around him, his family, of collusion, a non-crime. How irresponsible is that?
So there's a political Rorschach test that's going on here right now. Both sides see it very differently. And what the other hand, the Democratic point of view is, well, there were over 100 contacts with Russians during the campaign. Everyone that's been asked about it has repeatedly lied about those contacts. There were discussions about policy changes to favor the Republicans during the campaign. There was a request from Donald Trump Jr. and others to get dirt on the Clintons. There was a direction from the campaign to find out what the dump was going to be from WikiLeaks. So there's kind of a lot of circumstantial stuff on the other side.
Okay. And I think Oswald was in Mexico City before the assassination. But does that mean the Mexicans did?
Where we ought to be, if we want to find common ground, is where we ought to be. And I think the Washington Post had a poll on this today, is that Mueller is, I think, going to do a far more extensive investigation than the House.
Okay, but simple question.
Let's have that report be public.
That's okay. Whatever. Whatever. At this point,
no, but it's not whatever. That's the facts.
No,
but those are the facts.
No, this is a prosecutor's allegations. These are not the facts. A prosecutor comes up with a case which is not proven. It is a case like the kind that I make every night on this show. They're not the facts. It's a position. I'm just wondering if we can have an apology from the Speaker of the House and the Chairman of the House Intel Committee for saying things that were not true and that divided the country and made people afraid and paranoid on the basis of no evidence.
Well, you have to ask them how they want to respond to that. I think they would probably tell you that I'm not certain that the Democrats and Republicans are going to agree on the Senate intelligence report. I think there will be a dissenting view on the Senate intelligence report for starters. But secondly, I think they will also tell you that Mueller will go far beyond what the Senate Intelligence Committee will find in terms of his investigative ability, his subpoena authority, his ability to go overseas. So I think the Mueller report is going to be a more complete report.
Last question.
And the public, Tucker, wants the report to be public, and we can judge what are facts, what's evidence, what's not.
At this point, 2.5 years in, should Roger Stone spend the rest of his life in prison if we find out there was no Russian collusion? Like, what is the point of all this, of sending Roger Stone for the rest of his life to prison, honestly?
So I think the question on Stone is not just the question of collusion. I think the question is whether he was honest with prosecutors.
Okay.
But Tucker, you railed against the Clintons for obstruction of justice repeatedly because they weren't.
I certainly did.
Because of what you thought they were obfuscating with prosecutors. So you should be consistent here.
I supported Ken Starr's independent counsel investigation, and I'm ashamed that I supported that because it was totally wrong. This independent counsel thing is non-democratic. I should never have supported that.
Well, at least you're trying to be consistent.
Well, I'm trying to be honest. Yeah. Julian, thank you.
Okay.
Congress may finally have a deal to end the debate over a border wall. What is in it? Is it enough to satisfy the president? One of the members of Congress who's negotiated it joins us after the break.
Tucker Carlson.
Past 2 months of arguing about a border wall have not made the country any safer, but they have exposed the real nature of the debate. On the left, the mask is off. Progressives no longer pretend that they want a secure border. Nothing is more American, they tell us, than having no control over who lives in America. Walls are not just expensive, they are evil. Walls are not who we are, they constantly remind us without explaining what that means. Last night, while the president spoke to an event in El Paso, an unemployed, semi-coherent, life-ravaged Beto O'Rourke interrupted his one-man road trip to hold a counter-rally nearby. In between tugs on what may or may not have been a 40-ounce scuba tank of malt liquor, O'Rourke raved that walls are more than just immoral. They're deadly. Walls may look harmless, even charming, but like Ted Bundy, they kill people.
Here, in one of the safest in spite of walls. We know that walls do not save lives. Walls end lives.
Beto O'Rourke. Next time your church has a warm coat drive, give one for Beto. Well, walls end lives. That's what he said. They're murderers. You'd think that would be the final word on walls. Once you accuse a wall of being a homicidal maniac, what else is there to say? Can you be worse than a murderer? Turns out you can. Not only do walls kill, the media told us this week, but they are hardened racists as well. Every wall is like a cinder block Bull Connor. Watch the mouth breathers of cable television explain.
It's not about some flood of killers and gangsters, the brown menace, as I call what the president is pandering.
To blatantly attempt to stir up fear of people of color, of brown people, as my colleague Chris calls it, the brown menace that he's trying to scare you with.
The wall is kind of a metaphor for Donald Trump's presidency. The foundation of the wall is hate. It's fear.
Yep.
And it becomes fear of the other. And then it becomes fear of brown people, and it becomes fear of caravans, and fear of invasion.
We need an IQ test in cable TV. We can't just give these jobs to anybody. Is there like some kind of lottery for these jobs? Anyway, deadly, bigoted, terrifying. That's what the left says it thinks of border walls. And yet, amazingly, as of tonight, Democrats in Congress have agreed to pay for one, sort of, a version of one, really. Congressional negotiators say they are willing to give the president $1.3 billion for a border barrier. That's a quarter of what he asked for. It's slightly less than Democrats offered back in December before the government shutdown. The money could only be used on existing fence concepts along about 50 miles of border. That's not much, admittedly. But given the rhetoric, it's more than you might have expected. What's not in the deal so far? Well, there's no universal E-Verify. That would prevent employers from hiring illegal immigrant labor. There's nothing to deter sanctuary cities or otherwise enhance enforcement of our immigration laws. On the other hand, there's also no amnesty for DACA recipients or anyone else. Democrats are trying to restrict funding for ICE detention beds, but ICE will still exist if this deal is signed. The president said he's disappointed in the terms, but at this point he seems unlikely to veto it. This is not the end of the debate over border security, as long as the Democratic Party says it believes that locking your door at night is an expression of hate and fear. This will continue. Congresswoman Kay Granger will likely be at the center of it. She's a Republican representing Fort Worth, Texas. She helped negotiate this deal. We're glad that she's here tonight to tell us what's in it. Congresswoman, thank you very much. Are you happy with how this turned out?
I'm pleased. I wish we'd gotten more, but I'm glad. We're going to help the president build a wall. It's going to be a good wall, and we went to see that. I just got back from the border about an hour before his State of the Union, and I was so happy to see that he showed that wall and what's going to happen there. We were there for 3 days, went all the way from McAllen, Texas, you know where that was, El Paso, San Diego, California, to see what's happening and where it's safe and where it's not
So
safe.
Democrats are saying this is not a wall, and it would only cover about 55 miles of a border that's thousands of miles long.
Well, they're wrong. It is a wall. In fact, it was a wall. It was 20 years in the making because they tried different ways to make some sort of barrier, and most of them were poorly made, not enough funding, fell down, that sort of thing. But this wall we went right by what the border security needs. You can see through it so they can see, or are there 5 people over there or 500? Do they have guns or rocks or what's happening there? It can't be driven through. You can't cut through it. It's steel filled with concrete. It's a good wall, and it's going to go all those places that are so unsafe right now because people can come across so easily.
If the president determines that this isn't enough funding for the wall that he envisions and promised during his campaign and elects to use a state of emergency in order to fund the rest of it, would you support that?
I would. I would support. One of the reasons I went, I've been at the border many, many times. In 2014 and 2015, when the unaccompanied children come, John Boehner asked me to go and see what was happening and report and make suggestions of what we should do. I went back to see how much it had changed, and the president is right. It is a crisis. The number of people that are coming over, the conditions they're in, it's just, we have to take a very strong stand. So this wasn't as much money as we wanted, but it's a good down payment. There's a lot of wall already, and we'll add to that.
Why wouldn't former Speaker Paul Ryan, since this was the core promise of the president's presidential campaign, have made this a priority during the 2 years Republicans held the House?
I don't know. I can't answer for him. I can answer for me. And part of it is we had to understand that it was the crisis that it is and make it a priority. And so we started this process and passed 6 bills that help secure our country and our border. In what we're going through right now, to pass the bill that we've written, bipartisan, to keep our borders secure, we also have things that the defense can do, that energy and water can do. It covers.
Why not? Many people note that you could reduce the inflow of people here illegally very quickly if you prevented employers from hiring them. So why not make E-Verify universal? Why not punish employers for undercutting American workers with foreign labor?
Well, I guess part of it is some of the workers, they may have come here illegally, but they're good workers. When I came to Congress 20 years ago...
So does that mean it's okay that they stay?
No, but it says, why should you keep them? What we should really do, and we tried to do this 20 years ago, said if people want to come into our country and work, they wanted to say, how can you make it where we can come in legally and work, not move here, not have amnesty, but come here and work. We have jobs, we have that no one's filling, and we should have done that early on. It would have made a big difference, because then they make money, they take it back to their families, to countries they come from.
Congresswoman Kate Granger of Texas, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Democratic lawmakers are opposing deportation even for dangerous criminals. We have astonishing sound from a sitting Democratic senator. That's after the break. On TV used to tell you that no illegal immigrant was actually illegal because no people are illegal. People can't be illegal. None of them are criminals. Well, it turns out, actually, there are some criminals. So there's a new approach. Criminals who do cross the border illegally, it's real, but we shouldn't punish them once they commit crimes here because that would be immoral. Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey just said that basically out loud. He lamented that the Trump administration wants to treat alien drunk drivers like they've done something wrong.
The president's zero-tolerance policy that has turned everyone, regardless of their record, into a criminal. For example, if you cross the border undocumented, he has now made you a criminal. If a person has a driving while under the influence violation, he is now making that, saying that that's a criminal.
Coming from a guy who just somehow beat an indictment, I'd love to know how that happened. Yeah, you try a DUI arrest and see if you keep your job, but then you're not an illegal alien, so you're out of luck, looks like. Meanwhile, Menendez's colleague and 2020 hopeful Cory Booker says that meat eating is bad. It's like, you can't make this up. They're trying to get Trump elected. And then went on to say that veganism basically should be compulsory. It's necessary to protect the environment. It's unbelievable. Lisa Booth is a senior fellow at Independent Women's Voice, and she joins us tonight. Lisa,
hi, Tucker.
I mean, it looked just 2 months ago, Republicans, let's not lie about it, got creamed in the midterm elections. Democrats were ascendant, and then they started talking, and from what I could tell, Trump's numbers just kept going up. I mean, am I missing this? That's what happened, right?
I mean, I don't know if they're in cahoots with the president, because it seems like Democrats are doing everything they can to try to help President Trump get reelected. But look, listen to what Senator Bob Menendez said. I guess now he's saying that President Trump is trying to turn crossing the border illegally into a crime. Last time I checked, that was a crime. He's also saying that if an illegal immigrant gets a DUI, President Trump is trying to turn that into a crime. Last time I checked, getting a DUI, rather as an American or an illegal immigrant, is also a crime. So I guess the Democrat orthodoxy now is if you get into the country illegally, as long as you don't commit a violent offense, it's fine. I'm not really sure that's... I'm sorry?
But they're not extending these courtesies to American citizens.
Right.
So you misspeak in front of a congressional committee and they send 25 armed marshals to your house with automatic weapons and you face life in prison. I mean, why are they only liberalizing law enforcement for people from other countries?
Well, I think that's a good question for voters to ask Democrats, right? And I would also remind Senator Bob Menendez that the illegal immigrant that killed the legal immigrant, Ronald Singh, Corporal Ronald Singh, had 2 prior DUI arrests and had to come into this country illegally, obviously, which obviously not everybody that gets a DUI arrest is going to go on and commit some sort of heinous act. But point being is that he had illegal activity in his past and prior offenses here. And Tucker, this whole conversation with Senator Bob Menendez and Wolf comes down to the debate that recently happened over detention beds and Democrats wanting to cap the number of ICE detention beds.
No, I know.
And you've got people like the deputy ICE director, Matt Albenz, saying, look, this is not a good idea because if we're capping the number
of...
Right, they don't care.
Unfortunately, Lisa Booth, we're being told we're out of time, and we didn't even get to Cory Booker and his groovy veganism, but you're going to have to come back.
All right, we'll have to talk about.
Man. Great to see you.
Thanks, Tucker.
In her brief time in the political limelight, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said a lot of interesting stuff. Here's one thing she said.
An agency like ICE, which repeatedly and systematically violates human rights, does not deserve a dime.
That's right.
The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. This is the war. This is our World War II. I think that there's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right.
So not only dumb and totally ignorant of everything, but utterly self-assured. If there were a clinical exam for self-esteem, she'd be in the 100th percentile. How do people get like that? Is it our education system? Is it high schools? Is it colleges? We wanted to talk to someone on the front lines of this who might know the answer. Nicholas Giordano is a professor of political science at Suffolk Community College, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks very much for coming on.
Hi, Tom.
So there's a certain recognizable syndrome here where the people who know the least are the most self-confident. Where does that come from?
Well, it's the lack of critical thinking that exists. It's the superficial arguments they make that are completely unrealistic. If you look at the Green New Deal, it's incomprehensible, and when you're looking at it, she says the world's going to end in 12 years. So if we go with this plan and have to rebuild every building, it took us 13 years just to build the Freedom Tower, for instance. 6 years to build the Tappan Zee Bridge. Imagine having to do every single building in the United States up to new codes. It's just not going to work, and it's that they don't ask deep questions. The arguments are, it sounds good, people will support it because it's government giving us stuff, and so it's okay. But there are real consequences when you actually talk like this, because there are people that are going to take it seriously. You have a number of presidential candidates that have agreed with her plan. And when you're looking at the plan itself, you can't understand anything in it. It would lead to millions of people being underemployed or unemployed. Maybe they could learn code, who knows. It would lead to unconstitutional state violations because state and local governments are in charge of building codes. And so my question to her would be, has she read the Constitution, knows about the 10th Amendment and state rights?
No, but you heard, but I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding. You heard her say what matters is that she's a really good person and you're not. And so I'm thinking, as I'm watching this, remember that whole fad where we were supposed to give our kids self-esteem and that was the panacea? Did we create people like this when we did that?
Well, we did. Two things. The motto of the customer is always right created an entitlement culture, and then our children are precious also created the entitlement culture where everyone gets the trophy. When you're looking at it and you're trying to challenge the minds of the youth, they try and push back because they don't want to critically analyze the information to see if it really works. Page 10 of her New Deal talks about creating public ownership and receiving a percentage of compensation for the public ownership. Well, that's socialism. That's the very definition of socialism, and nobody's called her out on it in a sense. And it didn't work out so well for Venezuela. So is it really going to work out well for us?
No, not, I mean, I don't know. It's been great for, I guess, weight loss in Venezuela. They're starving.
They are.
Eating zoo animals. No,
and that's part of the problem. There's no critical thinking. And not only do you have that part, you have even more concerning, it talks about persons of the United States. It doesn't say U.S. citizens or U.S. persons, which is the definition for citizen and legal residence.
No, you're right.
So that raises the question.
Anyone who shows up gets to take your stuff. I mean, you can see where this is going. Professor, we're out of time, unfortunately. I commend you for having the patience to try and train a more impressive next generation of critical thinkers. Thank you for that.
No problem. Enjoy the night.
We have more on what's going on in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which has completely melted down. As you know, politically, top 3 Democrats all embroiled in scandals of their own making. Fox has now obtained Facebook posts from a second accuser against the Lieutenant Governor, Justin Fairfax, and we'll have those details after the break. Well, the top 3 elected Democrats in Virginia are still surrounded by scandal. Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax is refusing to step down in the face of multiple sexual assault allegations. Now, newly revealed Facebook messages obtained by Fox News show that his accuser, Meredith Watson, told friends about the alleged assault as early as March of 2017 and considered whether or not to come forward during the election of that year. In those same messages, Watson said she had not reported the attack back in 2000 when both were at Duke because she said the university mishandled a previous rape allegation that she had made. Tammy Bruce is a radio host, president of Independent Women's Voice, and joins us tonight to help assess the state of play in Virginia tonight. Tammy, thanks very much for coming on. What do you make of this, where we are now?
You know, it's kind of a sign of what the Democrats have brought, not just to Virginia, but to the country. You have a black man who is not getting due process, even though, for me, the accusers seem very credible. I'm not the arbiter of due process and of guilt and innocence. And yet, he is, for the South, it should be a sensitive issue. The hounding of a black man because of accusations, out of his job. He's been put on leave for the law firm that he works with, and he's part-time as lieutenant governor, making, I think, about $36,000 a year. So who knows how long that will be a tenable situation for him. And then you have 2 women who have, grown up in a supposed feminist environment, the Democrats controlling to some degree our social framework, who haven't felt comfortable still being able to report being assaulted. Now, women don't report for a variety of reasons because this is a complicated issue. But now we see the end result of what happens when you have a system that doesn't necessarily take women seriously still, which is what we've always argued for, and then later on in life finding out, the impact of what happens when we don't confront these issues. This is the result of what Democrats have said they are the champions of and they are representatives of, and obviously no one is winning in this situation.
No, that's for sure. So we've got a minute left. I'd just be interested, since you've seen a lot of stories like this and thought a lot about this subject, how do you think this specific story ends with Justin Fairfax?
Well, I think the environment is so toxic. He also has had, I think, 4 staffers leave, 2 at his PAC, 2 in his office over this. I don't think it's going to be tenable. I hope that there is some investigation that one way or the other, we have some information here. But I think that Virginia's got a lot to answer for. By the way, the state today apologized for lynchings. They apologized for the lynchings that have occurred in their state since the Civil War. So I think as a nation we have a lot to have to contemplate, but the answer is not sacrificing people into a volcano simply because of accusations. And I want women to have an environment where they feel safe in reporting when these events do occur.
I agree with that. That's a nonpartisan American point to make, and I'm glad
I think we all agree. Thank you, Tucker.
Tammy, thank you.
Thanks.
Really interesting story after the break. A feminist activist shut down by the left, of which presumably she's a part, for something called misgendering. In this case, misgendering a rapist. That woman will join us after the break to explain what this means and what it means for women in this country. Stay tuned. An activist in Baltimore says she was kicked off the city's Gay Rights Commission for using the wrong pronoun to describe a rapist. Trace Gallagher has more on this story, which we should clarify is real. Trace?
Yeah, hi, Tucker. Julia Beck was offered the chance to join Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh's LGBTQ commission. Beck thought it was a prime opportunity for her to voice the concerns of the underrepresented. But as the only lesbian on the commission, Beck claims she immediately felt excluded. She even wrote an article titled "How I Became the Most Hated Lesbian in Baltimore." Beck writes that she committed the unforgivable, saying she believes that even if a male identifies as a female, he's still a male. And she cited the case to have convicted convicted rapist Karen White, who is legally a man, admitted to raping several women, and was then sent to a women's prison in the UK, where he proceeded to rape 2 other female inmates. And after all that, it remains unclear if Karen White, who was David Thompson, is actually in the process of transitioning to a woman.